Give me eloquence or give me boredom. That's my slogan on March 23rd to commemorate this famous speech by Patrick Henry back in 1775 that ended with the ringing words, "Give me liberty or give me death." And to this I would add, give me principle. It is difficult to overstate the impact of Henry's speech. It was to the Virginia Convention, and the issue was, should Virginia send troops to support the American Revolution? And he is speaking to a gathering so distinguished that it includes both Thomas Jefferson and George Washington. And when he finished this speech, according to Edmund Randolph, this illustrious assemblage sat silent for several minutes. A number of people afterwards said it was the most effective speech they'd ever heard in their life. George Mason said that when you listen to Patrick Henry speak, your passions were no longer your own. There was a man standing outside listening to it who, when it was over, said, "When I die, bury me on this spot." And in 1810, they actually did. Now, Patrick Henry was obviously a very gifted speaker, but it wasn't just something that came upon him from on high, some strange reason that he could make anything sound like a salad recipe could move men to tears. It wasn't like that at all. Patrick Henry was as eloquent as he was because he was also an advocate of acting on principle. In fact, he had given very famous speeches on behalf of some very famous writing 10 years earlier. As the American Revolution was brewing, he was the author and defender of the so-called Virginia Resolutions in 1765. And these laid out a series of propositions to guide the colonists in their confrontation with Britain over misgovernment in the 13 colonies. And they said such things as, we have the same liberties as Englishmen back in England, because the colonists thought of themselves as Englishmen there. It's very important to understand the American Revolution was not a break with their British past. It was a determination to uphold their English liberties in the face of what they saw as an increasingly tyrannical government in London. Thus, the principle, no taxation without representation. One of the Virginia Resolves said, we cannot be taxed except by people we have elected. Why? Because that's how it's always been done in England. And it's a curious footnote to this that despite all his eloquence, there was one resolution that wasn't passed saying, and if we are taxed unjustly, we have the right to armed resistance. But newspapers printed both those things that had passed and those that hadn't, so there was widespread impression that Virginia had in fact voted for armed resistance to tyrannical taxation. Patrick Henry was regarded by a lot of people as a hothead, and in fact he was a hothead. He was given to extremes, but he was also a very moving and effective advocate for liberty because of the fact that he didn't compromise on principle. When he was accused back in 1765, people said that his remarks were treason, and he responded, if this be treason, make the most of it. We think he did. The record of some of this is not entirely clear. There were not television cameras at the time. But what is clear is that Patrick Henry was always one of those urging his fellows not to deceive themselves about what was happening, nor to compromise their principles for temporary convenience or ease. He was saying, we know what good government consists of. We are not seeing it in front of us. We must recognize what is happening and we must act on it. So by the time he stood up on March 23rd of 1775 to say that he thought that Virginia should send troops to join the revolutionary cause, he had a long-established record as a man of courage and of principle who drew logical conclusions from what he was seeing, not just about what men should think and say, but about what they should do. Can you imagine any politician today giving a speech so moving that somebody listening through a window would ask to be buried on the spot where they'd heard it? Now, admittedly, great oratory requires a great occasion, and great occasions are generally very uncomfortable. We wouldn't remember Winston Churchill if he hadn't led Britain at a time of hideous national peril that no sane person could possibly wish to come upon their nation. But is it not remarkable that the further politicians get from genuine conviction, the more appallingly dull and unmemorable and tedious their words become? Perhaps there's a lesson there, not just about oratory, but about clear thinking and bold action. I don't ever want to be faced with this choice between liberty and death. But I certainly would like politicians who can frame the choices before us in terms that clear and that compelling so that a Washington or a Jefferson would just fall mute with admiration. That's the kind of thing we have too little of that kind of oratory today because we have too little of that kind of principle. If you're enjoying these commentaries, please go to my website. That's johnrobson.ca and make a monthly pledge to sustain my work. And of course, keep watching The Rebel, keep subscribing to The Rebel to get that news and that commentary that you just won't get anywhere else.